These days, if you ask the average person about Wipeout, they are most likely going to think that you're talking about the stupid obstacle course TV show hosted by Richard Hammond, which is a shame. The last entry in the video game franchise, Wipeout 2048 for the Vita, wasn't all that great in my opinion, and since then Sony have shut down Studio Liverpool, formerly Psygnosis, so who knows if we'll ever see another entry in the series. Back in the PS1 era though, Wipeout was most definitely one of Sony's flagship series. It signified everything that was cool and new about the console, with stylish design, thrilling speed and an absolutely stonking soundtrack. The first few games were very influential on me. I bought many music CDs by the likes of the Chemical Brothers, Orbital and The Prodigy that I would never have touched if I hadn't played the games. That's not all the series had going for it though, as the gameplay was also fantastic, though also extremely tough at times. As the industry transitioned into the next wave of consoles, Sony and Studio Liverpool began work on Wipeout Fusion, which introduced a number of changes to the series. Some of these changes weren't very well received by die-hard fans of the series, but I didn't mind them. I'll get to the specifics in a little while. Going back to the game today for the first time in well over a decade, it has stood the test of time surprisingly well, so let's revisit the one and only PS2 entry in the series, long considered the black sheep of the Wipeout family, and find out why you should take it for a spin. Wipeout Fusion was released a few years into the life of the PS2, so the graphics are fairly indicative of that time. They are better than the very early launch games on the system, yet aren't up to the standard of some of the later games, where developers had really learnt all the tricks for squeezing the power out of the PS2. Stuff like Extreme G3 and XGRA that I looked at last season are a little bit more detailed compared to this, but I still wouldn't say it's an ugly game by any means. It retains the stylish look of the PS1 offerings, with the many different emblems for each team adorning the sides of the tracks, as well as the occasional Red Bull logo. There is a nice variety of environments to race around in, from neon-lit cityscapes, dusty canyons, tropical jungles and snowy wastes. Each track has 3 different layouts, which share certain landmarks but then go off into new areas, much like the track design for Ridge Racer. I like it when racing games do this, as it makes the track feel like they are part of a real location, with different permutations used for different events, much like real racetracks are. For the most part, the sensation of speed is perfectly adequate, but I did notice some quite bad slowdown from time to time, particularly when someone fires off the mighty Quake weapon. It's not usually anything that will mar your enjoyment of the game though. Speaking of the weaponry, there is quite a large range in the game, with the more powerful and advanced stuff being doled out as you make progress through the single player league. The usual suspects like missiles, shields, turbos and grenades are there, with mines, rockets, quakes, flamethrowers and super missiles all coming along throughout the game. The Quake is most definitely the most visually impressive of the lot, but the aforementioned slowdown is quite an ugly side effect. The Wipeout franchise is famous for its fantastic dance soundtrack, and Wipeout Fusion is no exception. Studio Liverpool tasked the plump DJs to compose a variety of tunes especially for the game, and they also remixed some fairly big tunes by other artists, such as Funny Break by Orbital and Stack of Humanoid by Humanoid, later known as Future Sound of London. This last track famously used a sample from the game Berserk. While I do like this soundtrack, it's not nearly as impactful or influential as those from the original Wipeout or Wipeout 2097. The music is backed up by some fine voice work from the robotic lady who announces which power-up you've collected, to the rather menacing sounding voice that will frequently say "Contender eliminated" throughout the frenetic races. The weapons all have their own unique sound effects too, and triggering a quake or locking on with a missile is made all the more satisfying by the great sound design. This is the area of the game that has changed the most compared to the older Wipeout games. In the PS1 trilogy, you chose a team, chose a speed class, chose a cup, and then raced. That was it, there were no upgrades or money to be earned. The main single player mode of Wipeout Fusion has you picking a racer from a fairly limited range in the beginning, and then attempting to place first in each cup in order to move on to the next one. By turning in a decent performance, you will be awarded credits, which can then be spent on upgrading your ship. Not having played a Wipeout game in quite a while, I was more than a little rusty when playing this game for the review, so I failed to come first during the first couple of attempts on the first cup. This wasn't a waste of time though, because I still had the cash to improve my character, making it a good deal easier to survive and win on the third attempt. This is the contentious area of the game. Purists would have you progress by your skill alone, but by including the upgradable ships, Studio Liverpool made the series more accessible for casual players, which I think is a good thing. By being persistent and retrying the cups, you will keep earning money to make your ship better. You will also get better naturally due to your familiarity with the track layout and the controls. Another great thing about Wipeout Fusion is the sheer variety of tracks included in the game. There are 7 locations with 3 layouts each, and then reverse versions which are also unlocked. This is by far the highest number of tracks to be included in a Wipeout game up to that point, and I think it still may be the most to this day, though the PSP game Wipeout Pulse with DLC included and Wipeout HD Fury might be close. The final thing that Fusion brought to the series, which has remained a staple to this day, is the really enjoyable zone mode. In this mode, there are no opponents or weapons, it's just you against the track. You have no control over the acceleration of your craft, and it gets faster and faster upon completion of each lap, until you inevitably lose all your shields and explode. It's fun to see how far you can get. This first version of the mode just uses the normal tracks and graphics from the rest of the game. In later versions, the tracks were incredibly stylised and very cool looking. The zone mode is a smart and entertaining addition to the package overall, and the changes to the campaign improve things as well in my opinion. Fusion has a lot more depth and lasting appeal compared to the previous games, with a ton of tracks and unlockable pilots, weapons and modes. Working your way through the AQ League mode and its many different cups will take you a significant amount of time, and then you have quite a few other modes to enjoy as well. Arcade mode is a fairly basic experience, where you pick a track, try and earn a gold medal, unlock another track and repeat. Challenge mode sees you tasked with reaching certain goals in each challenge, and there are 6 for each team. Completing them unlocks a unique super weapon for that team, so they are well worth doing. Zone mode has already been covered and is addictive enough to keep you coming back to try and beat your previous score. Time trial is for the expert players as they attempt to beat some tough times set by the developers. Finally, we have the multiplayer mode, which I have not been able to try out as yet, so I'm not sure how the performance holds up. I would imagine that the frame rate and the level of detail both take a hit though. I played a ton of Wipeout Fusion back when it was released, and I'm glad to report that it's still a huge amount of fun to play today. The campaign remains unique to this particular entry, as Studio Liverpool never reused it again in the games that followed. I don't think that this is quite the best game in the series. That would be either Pulse on the PSP or Wipeout HD Fury on the PS3 in my opinion. Fans of the series should definitely pick up a copy though, as there's a lot of enjoyment to be had for less than a £5.